Okay, everybody, thank you for coming back to the Xanadu Review. My name is Prester John Andrews, and as always, you can call me PJ. So today with me, I have an interesting author who goes by the name of Ringleader. We've already had one conversation before on his podcast, and it was, very pleasant. So we're having him on the Xanadu Review today to dig into a little bit more. So, Ringleader, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and whatever kind of writing you do, if they're not familiar with you?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Thank you, Prester John, for having me on. Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation as well. It was a lot of fun. So happy to be on your show here. Yeah, I mean, I've been writing on Substack for since like 2021, I guess. Just it was odds and ends to begin with. But I mean, when I started it, I did kind of start with the same core idea that has carried through all of my site on Substack there, Dog and Pony Shows. And really, it's all in the name, just commentary on the spectacle of culture, politics, history, what's true, what's not. So a lot kind of falls under that. Right on, I've written on everything from like Section 8 housing to demons to, Nick Fuentes, race relations. I mean,
All the big topics,
yeah. All the
light
things
stuff.
that are so obviously interconnected.
Mhm. I think we kind of have that in common since I tend to write about stuff that like on the surface seems like it might not be connected, and I try my best to have a through line between it. But I think I always enjoy thinkers like that who can take bigger concepts who might seem on the surface that are not connected, but you're able to weave a narrative. So it's always interesting to see somebody else with that perspective.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So I guess we'll first off jump into so you have a book also called Dog and Pony Show, right?
Yeah. The book's title is The Aping American, a
Yeah,
dog and
sorry,
pony
that's
show
right.
collection. Yeah, and
Mhm.
it's kind of I released it July 4th, 2025. So this past Independence Day, and really it's kind of just all of my work up to that point. I wrote a decent little bit more just for the book that's exclusive to the book. I've released some tidbits of that on Dog and Pony Show, but maybe a solid 10%, maybe even 20% of the book is new material. And definitely the presentation and everything and the formatting and all that. I did all of that myself, and so I
It
put a
looked
lot of.
good.
Thank you, man.
Mhm.
Yeah, I put a lot of effort into it, as far as just making it look good and making it be something that I would want to have on my shelf, that I would want to flip through physically and actually read and just kind of pick a page at random and check it out. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's one reason why I kind of just decided to do the collection, because I'd initially had been in progress on writing a book on backyard nationalism, which is kind of just my project in discussing and kind of teasing out the parameters of what like free association could look like, ought to look like, in the 21st century, given America's history and our past and present and all that. And that quickly, uh, what do they call it? Like project creep or something, ambition
Mhm.
creep or
Scope
whatever.
creep. Scope
Scope
creep, I
creep.
think is the term.
Yeah. And as I'm outlining that out, I'm like, well, this is going to be a big endeavor. So let me just practice a bit, and I'll put together a book of my work so far, and that turned into the Aping American. So
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I like I said, I read like I don't know, maybe like 20% of the PDF. And again, like the art is really neat. I like the little hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, monkeys at different page breaks and stuff like that. That's a nice little touch. And going through different fonts and stuff. It has it's not boring as far as like the presentation goes. Um, but I guess the first thing I want to talk about is um, I guess you expect a certain thing going into, reading somebody like a book like that one, especially, based off of somebody's image or the type of things you write about. But you have like a decent amount of poetry in there, which is, maybe not something people might necessarily expect. Um, and I liked it. I'm not, I guess, a poetry connoisseur. I'm maybe not traditionally educated in that way. So I kind of, when I come by poetry, it's catch as catch can. But it feels how would I put it? It's some of it's like I would say it's like very uniquely and recognizably American in a way that you don't necessarily see anymore. I guess in maybe more of like a traditional or classical sense, but also like kind of very online as well. It's like Mark Twain crossed with like a 4chan shit post. Um, so what's
Nice.
yeah, what's your, I guess, your writing process there? Because there was a couple there that I really liked. Like it was Lagged Out and what was it, Home Sweet Scrap Heap. Like particularly like it was very evocative of like I guess a particular type of Americana that I think, it sounds like, because you're from the South, that you're familiar with. My dad's side of the family is from the South, so it made me very nostalgic for those summers that I would spend, down in the deep South. Like the Home Sweet Scraps Heap was interesting too, because it had like a and I'll let you describe it. Like it felt very current too, because it like with that style of writing, you could be LARPing like it's 1902 or something, but it felt current, but also reminding me of something older.
Yeah, dude. Well, that's super cool to hear. I'm glad you liked it. It's yeah, that one in particular, Home Sweet Scrappy, that one's definitely a close one. It's probably one of my favorite poems that I've written. And as far as like my writing process, like that one and Lagged Out as well, both of those are very personally inspired, just in terms of like daily life. Like in Home Sweet Scrap Heap, like I've literally, I do like for years and years I've done reselling and like antiques and things like that, and that's also kind of a bit, there's some like family history there as well. And so just like kind of pondering that and having grown up with that, and then also all of the periphery of that as well, when you really do have like such a disposable life. And that's time is really the big thing I think that I explore in the whole collection, even in like the political pieces of the book and the essays and things like that, where I may be discussing kind of more political issues. The through line on almost all of it, I think, really is time and our perception of it and how we relate to it. So what even is a culture, right? What even is an American? Well, it's got to be something that, an American has to be someone that has lived an American life. Well, how do you determine what that is? There has to be a period of time for that to develop. You're not just, the settlers at Jamestown, they didn't just land there in Chesapeake Bay and just immediately become Americans. There were still Englishmen first and foremost, and so you got a centuries long process of becoming an American. And that, not to get on too much of a tangent just off the one poem there, but like Home Sweet Scrap Heap specifically, it's like digging through just discarded stuff on the side of the road, where you can tell there's been good things thrown away just because they don't have the time or the capacity to do anything with it, and like seeing old family photos and seeing things that may have been one man's trash but another man's treasure type of thing, the old adage goes. And in a way, my book is reckoning with whether America is one man's trash and another man's treasure. Like if we're at that stage, and I think we've been at that stage at many points in the nation's history and this land's history.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, that kind of stuff, I guess, is kind of what I'm neck deep in.
No, it's beautiful stuff and it's a beautiful sentiment. And I'm glad you brought it up because I think increasingly that's becoming a big part of my project as a writer. And I guess to a certain degree as a podcaster too, because I talk to some people who are overseas, but predominantly people who are in America. And I'm trying to kind of the same thing. Like what is America meant historically? What can it mean in the future? What does it mean now? Because those are all very different questions and very different answers. And I've talked to people who, because just for example, so for me, like on my dad's side of the family, we've been here since like the 1600s. I think they're like what's the term? Indentured servants brought over, like one of the first rounds, and then they were up in Appalachia and the South and stuff like that. Sharecroppers and whatnot. And on my mother's side, they came from here from Ireland in like the early 1900s. So it already on me, like on my side, I already have like I guess you could say the heritage American side and the immigrant side. And I've talked to different people and had them on my podcast who have been, immigrants to the United States from like Romania or other places in Eastern Europe or Nigeria or India. And that's part of what the question that I find really interesting, because how America continues to change and evolve, like as a culture and an identity, because we're very different from those early like English settler days. We're very different from that second big wave of European immigration, and then we had like the 1960s immigration, and now and so on and so forth. And it's something that continues to change. And I know some people who are very black-pilled about it, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time, but I'm still maybe a little bit hopeful about it, that there can be something cohesive that's still unique about American identity as it grows. Just because and again, sorry if I'm a little too long-winded here, but that's been my project too, is like, because for a long time I was, I guess you could say, very deracinated, very much like, it's like, I just always want to go on to the new thing, like classical American identity, that's passe. But over the last couple of years, I've been, researching my family history, and trying to understand, my family history and the history of this country, and how, where the two come together. Since, one of the things that really resonated with me about Home Sweet Scrap Heap is because, I had recently, a couple of years, my grandpa passed away, and we were going through all his stuff, and helping my grandma move, and just looking at all this stuff, and like, I still have this old, patchwork quilt that was made by my great grandma that I took, or like, an old harmonica that doesn't work, and these very like Americana pieces. And it's something that I think is still good and worth preserving. But at the same time, like finding a way that it's going to make sense in the modern world, in the modern America.
Yeah. No, right on. I think, we're definitely reckoning with really similar things there. I think it's an important thing for everybody to know where they come from, whatever that may be. whatever culture. And the thing about the America, like the post World War II America, certainly it's been ramped up significantly, or it was ramped up significantly, probably like in the immediate, that 10-year period right before Trump, right? I mean, Obama years and everything, where all of a sudden it was like Obama pulled us out of Iraq, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, America is just like Coca-Cola and, you know, I don't know, Coca-Cola and whatever else
Taco
Obama's,
Bell, who cares? Yeah.
Taco Bell, Obama's yearly Spotify playlist or whatever. I guess Spotify wasn't out in his first term. Maybe it was. I was still torrenting stuff at that point, but yeah, the conversation has shifted, which is really, really good and really important. And I think it'll only continue to, just through the whole West. I mean, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle, I would say. And one interesting thing is that, like, even as like the native European peoples of like the West and the various countries continue to lose their culture, continue to become minorities in their major cities. This whole conversation and dynamic, it'll just become more inevitable. It's one of those things where it's actually really easy, and I think it was super. I think probably like the neoliberal order establishment, left, right, Bush, Obama, took very for granted where you could have like the subsection of left leaning Americans and just like kind of white Americans in general that they want to feel like they're doing good, the white savior complex kind of thing. They want to feel like they're they're lifting up everybody, that kind of thing. And it's super easy to, I don't want to get lost in the weeds, but I think that dynamic was really, really easy to kind of shift the needle, like boil the frog slowly. But I mean, once you're dealing with a situation like we have now, where we've got 20 million plus illegal immigrants, the actual numbers are like drastically shifting. Like the actual demographic makeup is drastically different, even just from 10 years ago. People stop playing so nice and people start kind of realizing the stakes. And I think once people start realizing that they're getting dispossessed of their own heritage, their own culture, they're paying taxes 20% plus of their life's work. They're paying into a system that exists to just function broken. That's when you really start getting into treacherous territory, right? That's when you really start getting into those dynamics where people get entrenched and there's not conversation to be had. There's not even a no one's going to get around the same fire to begin with, much less sing kumbaya,
Yeah. I think that's something I thought a lot about as well. I think there was, at least because it's not, I think we're around the same age last time we talked, like early 30s type of thing.
Mhm.
So it does feel noticeably different, even from, from we were kids or even young adults. And I do think that there is like I think the American project still has like a lot of ability to integrate people in and create a new culture. And we've seen that happen many, many times in the past. I mean, and I've said this before to other people on the podcast. Like, there's um, at the time of like, the say like that first, I guess that second big wave of European migration. At the time, these were not like trivial differences, like Catholicism, like it's something that's not widely taught, but like the second Ku Klux Klan was formed like much more in opposition to European immigration because they thought Catholicism was this it was like these were not trivial differences at the time.
Yeah.
That having been said, there was the option over time to assimilate and create a more cohesive culture. And on one level, like I hope we don't need like world wars to do that. But at the same time, I think another thing you said that is very accurate is like, there was that, if you want to call it the neoliberal project or whatever, or, some people might just say like, global capitalism, however you want to put it. It feels like there's not a lot of gas in that tank. And that's because, I've always lived in bigger cities and I feel like, people will find a natural rhythm and people act like it's, uh, open race war, but it's usually more or less fine. People find a rhythm, but if there's not good economic opportunity, then I think that's when things really start to, can get ugly realistically, and based on all types of different lines. And I think like the political and cultural lines are just as much as if not more, more prescient. And that's the thing that does worry me, because I do think that people can find a lot more in common with each other than sometimes they're given credit for. But yeah, that does sometimes worry me that like at the same time all this is happening, and I'm only going to talk about America because that's the place where I live. I know Americans. That's what I can speak to. I can't really speak to Europe at all. Um, but that does seem like it could potentially be problematic because, like you said, even in the Obama administration, um, I think it was that it still felt like there was more goodwill or something. I don't know.
Yeah, at least initially, that was yeah, so weird. It was a weird period. It's definitely it was like the end of racism for like a short little window. And then I guess there were already signs probably in Obama's first term, but like by the time of his reelection, it was like full blown identity politics and just rode that all the way out. But yeah, it's in America, I think you're right. I think that there is still a lot of potential if we would pump the brakes, if we would kind of get a grip and just collectively come to our senses as a country, no matter what your stripe is. Just recognize that, look, there are people that should be here, in the sense that they haven't broken any laws. There are people that have broken laws that just should not be here, because otherwise, then what's the point? Why are people going through all of the stress and the hoops to do things the right way?
Mhm.
And if we would just do that, then we could have a conversation about, okay, well, what would a freer America with liberty for all look like, with the various peoples that are here? And I think that there would be a pretty broad array of groupings, all the way down. I mean, you'd probably have areas of the country that would be able to successfully be relatively multicultural, quote unquote. You'd have areas of the country that people would be able to say, well, this is our area of the country. We're Iowan, we're Idahoan, whatever. What are Idaho? Are they Idahoans?
I feel like they wouldn't want to. Idahoans just doesn't sound good to me.
Does it?
But
Dad always would make the joke, classic dad joke, right? Of Idaho, Idaho.
Yeah, that was. I remember as very serious points you're making. As a side note, that was like one of my big W's as a teenager. I was like, oh, somebody was giving a spam call from Idaho. I handed it to a girl. I was like, oh, who's this from? She says, Idaho. I was like, yeah, you are.
Classic.
Yeah, classic stuff. Very dumb teenage boy. But
yeah.
I think you have a good point there, and I wonder, because the history of the United States is kind of federated in that sense, right? There's been a lot more local culture and local flavor and kind of local even like local cuisine and like even regional accents, and it feels like we've kind of lost that a little bit. Again, I remember even when I was a kid, like it was when we would visit my parents' family, or sorry, my dad's family in the South. There was like much more noticeable different culture, and like the accent, and not that doesn't exist anymore, but it feels like the most recent times I visited, like, you obviously have a Southern accent, but it's not what I would call super, super heavy. And it feels like that's kind of going away and we're losing that regional specificity. And I don't know if that's just like a function of, then everybody watching the same media or the internet, but I don't know. I think it'll be like I think I've said this before. I think it'll be a reshuffling and finding what those new regions are going to be. But I don't know. I do think there's still gas in the American project, at least, because I don't know if you know Alex Kashuda. She does some interviews and she has a podcast. And she's from Romania, and I went on her podcast and I was kind of talking about, I feel like America's kind of done, and she's from Romania. She's like, people still outside of the United States still like America and still find it aspirational to like come to America to be Americans. And interestingly enough, I remember seeing something recently, like it was like a poll of how different countries will view America, and like all the Europeans kind of hate us, but like other different countries seem to like us more. Like the farther away you get from that really deracinated culture that you see in Europe or whatnot, but it feels like there's still something there. So that kind of makes me hopeful that I think there are some people, because that's the thing. Like I hate to use the term like politically homeless or whatever, because it's become very cliche and kind of cringe, I think. But like where I sometimes break with my more liberal friends is like, I'm somewhat more conservative on immigration, but like my position on immigration is like what Obama ran on in 2012, which I don't think is like an insanely radical position, which I think people act like it is now, but I think that's probably because you need cheap labor, basically, and I think that's where a lot of this rhetoric comes from, and that's what a lot of is being pushed. But all that to say, I think there are some times you see people who are just being extractive, but I do think a lot of people just like legitimately just want to come here to be American and not just like live here.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that definitely that is definitely still true, and it does mean something to plenty of people being an American around the world. And it's interesting, you know, it would be interesting to kind of those people, I would imagine they've got a pretty similar, like if they genuinely like want to be an American, other than just kind of this idea that it behoove them, materially or whatever.
Mhm.
I feel like something that I've seen and heard from people, um, a lot of it has to do with, of course, like wanting a better life for their kids, and but still believing that America is a place where if you work hard, apply yourself, whatever your capacity is, America is a country where you have a shot to be successful. Um, with success meaning, is something as basic as just then being able to lead a life such that your children will be able to lead a better life than you did. And I think that that is a good impulse. I think that that is a moral impulse, and it's definitely something that is a good thing. And the kind of the critical mass, the tipping point that we've reached in this country is where that life is now, for so many Americans, not available to them. Um,
Agreed. Probably the most, honestly.
yeah, and so that's really kind of that critical juncture, where if we don't do something and make a break for a better path, then you know the people that are coming over here, they'll be coming over here to loot what's left, and
Because
we can't
that's
have that.
I think I forget where I heard it in another podcast. Like the difference to me is if somebody comes here and they want to be a part of the culture, and they're like, trying to get a house here and buy, save their money here versus like, sending money, the majority of their money back where, um, back wherever, their homeland was. Because to me, like at that point, you're bought in, you're a part of the project, and of course, there's cultural differences, and that's none of those things that like I will break with some of my liberal friends on, in some ways, and conservatives on others. Like there are cultural differences; these are real, but at the end of the day, like these aren't like unbridgeable gaps. Especially because we have mostly people from South America who come from a Christian culture. Spanish is not that different. Like I think there's not anywhere near, nowhere near as much difference as, you know, um, in some other cases. And to me, that's a reasonable, I don't know, reasonable difference to bridge. But I would much rather have like because I, I'm kind of I live in an area that has like a lot of people who are like Hispanic or like from Mexico or somewhere else in South America, and these are people who are like overwhelmingly like just come here. They look generally seem to like learn English. They like cowboys and stuff like that. That doesn't bother me. Somebody like a Vivek Ramaswamy who come, of course he was born here, but um when you're starting a kind of like a bullshit company that I forget the specifics of his startup, but it was not really creating anything. It's just kind of pumping and dumping.
Some kind of like
Um,
biotech patent company or
yeah,
something, buying
it
and
was
selling
something
bio patents or something, maybe.
something like that, or like some kind of venture capital thing. And like his family hasn't like didn't become citizens. Like to me, like that feels very extractive and like
Mhm.
not even that different from colonialism. And to me, and maybe that's a line that is not super coherent, and maybe that's just my arbitrary line of like, but if you want to be a part of the project, you're here, you want to stay here, that's one thing. And it doesn't matter if you're from India or like Russia or even European people who come over here. A lot of these, from Germany or England, like they're just kind of looting, like you said. I think that's where it becomes a problem for me, and that's where I'd like to see, or like I think that's a big problem as far as like home ownership. There's like Chinese or like European bank backed companies that will just buy up real estate so people here can't afford it. Like, but I think there would need to be, and I don't see, despite like even like the Trump administration, what they're saying, or Biden talked about it, like that to me, that seems like an easy W, like, just like ban foreign investment companies from buying American property. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of will for that at the moment.
Yeah, it's a weird state of things right now. I definitely, yeah, I think that, well, maybe the best way I could put it is honestly the way where we're at as a country, culturally, economically, really the liberal alternative ought to be like a minimum 25-year total immigration moratorium. And if things keep going the way they're going, then I think that the right, that will become like the liberal, nice alternative on the right. Trump has made progress. They have the poor. I don't keep up with these things like day to day. I think it's a waste of time. But I'll catch kind of the goings on here and there. I mean, with as online as I am, I probably ought to be better apprised of the specifics. But I mean, I know that there have been a fair amount of deportations. But every single illegal immigrant out of the country, I think, again, I mean, that's like, as far as the right is concerned, like a conservative position, that ought to be the liberal position. And I think if things continue to kind of like get pussyfooted around, I think that the liberal option on the right will only continue to shift more and more right as things become more and more desperate. And so, I think that the conversation and the conversation's happening. I think the H-1B thing you brought up, Vivek Ramaswamy, that whole H-1B situation, that was a huge, huge canary in the coal mine, especially insofar as like Trump was just totally all in on H-1Bs and is still kind of, not totally against it. Again, I don't keep up with the day-to-day on it. I know he's walked back being quite as gung-ho as he was initially, but I'm skeptical of whether that's genuine or not, or just politics as usual. But yeah, I mean, H-1B type situation where, I mean, literally there were, and it's not just India, it's like China. There were like thousands and thousands of Chinese students that were getting educated at public universities in this country, taking spots from Americans. And then, whatever percentage of those, they go right back to China. And they come over here, they're educated, and you could have like this, of course, like a libertarian or like free enterprise kind of thing of, oh, well, if they're spending the money over here, then that's good, it contributes to the economy, yada yada. I doubt that, even on its face. I mean, I don't know. Someone could show
GDP is kind of fake, in my opinion. I don't know.
But yeah,
I think it's a better investment to educate Americans of all stripes.
Yeah,
People are
exactly.
gonna again live here, and again that's what I come back to. It's one thing if you immigrate here, you become educated here, you want to be a part of the project, and you're going to use that education here. But I think that's a pattern we've seen in the past that I think ironically is now coming home. Essentially, it's just extracting resources from the United States, and I think the a lot of the leadership class is very complicit in it because they're all making money on that. And
Hmm.
they're, I don't know, at this point, like I said this in our last conversation, it wasn't that long ago. Bernie Sanders was saying, that open borders were a Koch brothers scheme. Um, I don't, to me, like I don't care who does it as long as we have something that makes things, better for American workers and, is not exploitative. I guess that I don't know what you would even call that, but at this point, like, basic things like, hey, maybe there should be again laws that would keep, these foreign investment firms from just buying up uh American homes so people can't afford them. Like that would be nice. It feels like that should be like a very basic thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd that that's allowed at all. Um, so many aspects like of our current situation when you're looking at like what's driving the the landscape of it, it's it's mind-boggling how simple the legislative fix would be if our politicians actually cared about the well-being of the people that are voting for them. But the purpose of a system is what it does. That's tossed around a
mhm.
lot, and I think that there's a lot of truth to that. They are enriched by the way things are, and so whatever they have to do to check the boxes. They get these 1,200 page plus omnibus bills 2 hours before they're supposed to vote on them. And then they vote
Mhm.
on it with a straight face as if they actually know what the hell they're voting on.
Yeah, it's
You know,
nonsense.
it's total nonsense. It is a clown world. It is a dog and pony show. It's theater. Um, a lot of people in our space online interested in politics and all that. You hear the old sports ball um, pejorative thrown around about being a sports fan or caring about sports or this and that. And hey, I do my fair share of that too. I don't really care all that much about it, but I would venture to say that almost all of the political bickering and political dialogue uh, it operates in much the same way. Where you've got people online that are going back and forth about what this, that, or the other person said or is doing politically, and at the end of the day, um, they're the ones in the club, and they're in the
Mhm.
same club. Not to old Carlin was an idiot, but at least that one bit was pretty true.
Yeah, I think the best way I heard it put is like, it is like kind of like football where like, they both teams genuinely want to win and they want to beat each other, but they do want to make sure that, they keep the game as it is and you're still, not in the game, so to speak. So I think
Hmm.
you're right about that. Um so I want to shift gears ever so slightly. There's two more things I wanted to talk to you about. The first one being when you're talking about the WWE aspect, since I think we kind of got kind of on the same page on that last topic. It is indeed kind of bullshit, and I'm hoping for something, somebody to be a little bit more going to be able to take the reins and move away from that paradigm. And I am a little bit bullish on that in the long term, since it does seem like we had just kind of the say what you will about either, like, the both Biden and Trump kind of felt like the logical endpoints of those old um, poles of, like, boomer liberalism. Um, so I think that, like, just just by virtue of, like, when a system stops working at a certain point, there's going to be something else that's going to be able to come up and meet it. Um, but you're talking about the football or the entertainment aspect. Um, but like the WWE thing, I remember a little while back before it occurred, you called the shot of Nick Fuentes going on Tucker Carlson. Um, and I want to know if you had any more thoughts on that or what's going on in that world, since it's honestly like I didn't really watch Tucker Carlson or Nick Fuentes before that. But I just wanted to, I guess, give you a shout out for that, because you totally accurately called that the Fuentes Carlson crossover.
Yeah, dude. Well, I appreciate it. It's I don't know. It was funny, man. That whole thing is still super funny to me. And honestly, that piece was kind of born out of a late night conversation I was having with a brother, just like ranting about the whole scope of things and it not making any sense. And I was like,
And how that is.
yeah, like it really only makes sense if they're all fed somehow. And tongue in cheek, I don't, but I had to
I
just
don't.
when I had that thought, I was like, all right, let me just like write this out. And so that's that piece is the results of that. And yeah, I mean, I thought that was inevitable for a while, that Fuentes would go on Tucker's show. But when really that like whole beef started going about Tucker's dad and them calling each other feds and stuff, I mean, it was almost too obvious. It felt
That's
like.
kind of what I felt. Like I admit, because I've been watching a lot of Tucker Carlson recently, because I'm working on a piece on like conspiracy culture theory, or conspiracy theory culture, that is.
Mhm.
And I'll, to his credit, I will say, like, there's some things I will agree with Tucker Carlson on, because he talks about some of these same things that we're talking about, like basic affordability, and then he'll just kind of like go in other really weird directions that I can't tell if he's pandering to an audience, or he legitimately believes these things, or what, because depending on time, I do want to get into, like, talk of like demons and aliens and all this stuff. And regardless of what you believe about it, it feels like it's a little bit jarring, if you know what I mean, that, like,
Mhm.
you'll see he's talking about serious, like, well, like, not fringe at all geopolitics stuff, Ukraine, Russia, what have you, Israel, Palestine, and then the next one will be demons and aliens, and then it's Nick Fuentes, who's like, up until pretty recently, this very fringe figure.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't. Maybe you're right, as far as the Fed thing is, because, as they say, there's no such thing as a former Fed.
Mhm.
So I don't really know if that it whenever, because I did a podcast recently, where I talked about the interview with a couple other different guys on Substack, and my takeaway is, like, I feel like this is a psyop. I just don't know who it's for and what it's trying to accomplish, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I feel you. Yeah, it's funny. Like, and for the record, I like Tucker. I like
Mhm.
Nick even. And I've watched both for a long time. I mean, I was watching Nick not like a lot, really. I mean, I would like catch his stuff every now and then, or like I remember back in like 2015 and everything, like when he first started streaming and stuff, and he was like he like streamed with another guy. I forget his name at this moment, to start with, and they had like a different channel name. I forget what that was even called. And then he eventually broke off and did his own thing with America First later. And yeah, I'd been watching Tucker for years. I mean, Tucker is like the only thing that only person on cable television I considered even like worth watching at all. And then of course when he got kicked off of Fox and stuff, I mean, it's a pretty clear sign that they don't like what he's saying. But then, it it
Because I
does,
remember, so I was
yeah.
just gonna say sorry specifically because I remember like that. It's not really my world. I wasn't really like a CNN lib guy either. But to me, like you know, call me a cynic or whatever. To me, it's all corporate news essentially. But I
Mhm.
remember seeing one clip by him where he was being critical about the war in Ukraine, and our kind of unflinching support of it. And I was like, this is weird. I remember when I thought that the Democrats are the anti-war people and the Republicans are the pro-war people. Because I remember that being a moment. I was like, this does feel like it's a little bit out of the paradigm, and that's definitely
Mhm.
something that gave me pause. So it's interesting to see the way that like the media landscape is changing in that sense.
Yeah, it is interesting. And like I read Tucker's biography um from a couple years ago or whenever that first came out, and they he I don't know, he traces a little bit of like the development of his political beliefs some. I mean, because he was on MSNBC way back, and he was kind of like
Mhm. The heel.
he was kind of like the center right heel type of
Mhm.
guy. And I remember there's even some clip of him like giving Pat Buchanan a hard time, I think, or I don't know
Mhm.
if it was in a
Or the
direct
John Stewart
interview.
clip for that matter. That's
Yeah,
where I saw him first.
yeah. And I know like he was like counter signaling Buchanan really hard one time. And he since years later apologized publicly for that, and admitted that Buchanan was right on non-intervention and on America First. Um, and so, to what extent is Tucker actually sincere? I tend to believe that he probably is sincere, even on all the demon stuff and all of that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not an asset in some capacity. I mean, he's an asset
Mhm.
some way. I mean, all of these public talking heads are assets to somebody. They all act as an uh, intelligence arms of some group, whatever
Mhm.
that may be. I mean, even if it's with Fuentes, if it's just his Groiper army, right, of whoever's donating $10 a month to him, adding up into tens of thousands of dollars a month. Even if it's just that,
Mhm.
but I would think that it's probably more than that. All right. I mean, they have connections, they have relationships, and that's the weird thing ongoing to kind of this is a whole nother can of worms, but I'll wrap it in, is like with Candace Owens and like the fallout from Charlie Kirk getting assassinated and everything, and kind of the I don't know how much you've been seeing all of her like questioning of the whole situation, like the official narrative and stuff, and even to some extent. And again, I haven't like been combing through video of this stuff, right? Like I don't,
Yeah.
this
It's a little
isn't
grotesque.
yeah, this isn't really my life to like pay attention to political drama. I'll just catch things here and there, and I take it with a grain of salt because that's all it's worth anyway. um but like specifically, I know one big kind of psyop going on is like whatever Candace has said or not said, there's this huge counter signaling of like, Candace, you're attacking a grieving widow, you're attacking Erica Kirk, you're like, this is evil, this is wrong, and all this and that. Um, and it's just a weird situation all around.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
a
that's the
very
vibe
weird
that I get.
situation.
I do. Well, that's kind of what I was getting on. I said, I feel like as a psyop, I just can't tell who for. Because you know, there's so many different directions you could take it, and to a certain degree, like, cards on the table. I was never like a Charlie Kirk fan. I never followed him. I kind of thought of him as a like, just that very typical like old school Republican neocon. But I mean, first of all, like, that's doesn't mean you deserve like political violence on that level. Like, it's grotesque, and I found it grotesque the way people were celebrating his death. But more than anything, like, I don't know what anybody thinks they're going to accomplish with that. It feels or with any of this stuff. Like, I don't know who would be for. Like, there's all kinds of different theories that you could have that, you know, Tucker and all these people will, represent like a nascent faction of, America First elites, or some people who say like, Tucker's still the heel. He's associating with somebody like Nick Fuentes to like, tank the credibility of the America First movement. Since, I don't know, at least to me, like Nick Fuentes, I don't know what is supposed to be serious, what's supposed to be a joke. I find some of what he says very odious. But to me, like, more than anything, he seems like a shit poster. That like,
Sure.
if you talk to anybody, if you were to show Nick Fuentes to anybody under 30, like, that's the takeaway.
Yep.
And I'm somebody who's like been in this world for, like, I was a teenager on 4chan, so I'm not exactly, phased by some of that language. Whether or not I agree with it, it's like I'm not phased by it. And that's just kind of maybe my bias, that like he just seems like a shit poster and he's very unserious. So that would be if I were to be super cynical, it's, because I remember seeing, like, of all things, like on Substack or YouTube or somewhere, Nick Fuentes was talking to Richard Spencer. And I think at this point it's uncontroversial to say like Richard Spencer was a Fed and or like a heel, So to me, that's the vibe that I get from it. But past that, like, even still, I don't know. Maybe it could literally just be that, Nick Fuentes has audience capture and he's, getting his 10 grand a month from the Groypers, or, Tucker Carlson, he's getting his organic dog treats advertiser money. I really can't tell,
Yeah, I don't know. I just had to put in another Alp.
That's you're not a Zen guy. You're into the Alps.
Yeah, I think Dog and Pony Show is an Alp gang.
Okay, I might have to try some of those because I've been
You should actually.
So I quit
I'll
everything.
send you my code.
Okay, yeah, send me the code because I quit drinking. I quit weed, but I need a little something. And the Zins, they're fine, but I've heard much better things about the Alps.
Yeah, I mean, I like them. I'm not. I'll get some and then I'll pop them for a little bit just while I'm like working or doing something, and I'll kind of go through my order, and then I don't know, for whatever reason, like nicotine has never like hooked me like it does a lot of people. Like I'll run out and then I won't think about it, or maybe I'm so oblivious that like I just don't associate any of the negative withdrawal symptoms to like, oh, I needed some nicotine.
Everybody has different hooks, like it's that for me, nicotine is like a treat. I know some people who like they're absolutely jonesing, but for me, it's kind of the same way for me. But yeah, I'll definitely take you up on that.
Yeah,
but
man.
yeah, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I want to be respectful of your time. There's one more thing I wanted to ask you before we finished up, but do you have any thoughts? What does that feel like? Does that track? Do you have any thoughts on like what, if anything, that whole situation is trying to get across? Because to me, like, I feel like I've just kind of lost the plot as somebody who is I guess you could say a noticer and tries to see the big trends. Like I just can't tell if this is just for the advertisers or for a specific point. Do you have any
Yeah,
inklings?
yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely have a lot of thoughts, I'd say, on all of that. I think at the end of the day, it kind of just comes down to, I mean, honestly, with anything, it kind of comes down to a person's fruit and what are they actually affecting in the world. And so, I don't say that to like provide an answer for Nick or Tucker or Candace or any of these people. I mean, it's something that people can judge for themselves. You shall know them by their fruits. So, it's something where if you are really listening to what they're saying, like the scope of what they're saying, you're listening to understand where they're coming from, then I think that if you're a discerning person, that you can kind of at least see a through line, to some extent, of whether they're sincere, for one, um, and two, whether what they're saying is, actually going to be beneficial and for the public good. And so I think that, yeah, I think that should be the metric. And as far as it goes to, yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, uh, I won't it'd be a big conversation to opine on like any of those
Mhm.
three specifically, but who they are, like, as just like archetypes, people, just their functions, right? They are talking heads, they are mouthpieces, like they are trying to be a canary in the coal mine. So it's just a matter of like, do you trust the canary is signaling that there's an issue in the coal mine, or are you even in the coal mine? Are you in the same coal mine that they're talking about? Because a lot of people, I mean, most of the people that take the most umbrage with what Nick says, what Tucker says, or what Candace says, and I'm just using those three because they're, I think, the biggest three names really right now, kind of in the, um, I'll just say alt-right. It's an old term, but I'll reclaim the term just for the specific description of the scenario of just kind of anti-establishment right. Um, then, if you're outside of that, you're not in the same coal mine as they are. Um, and no puns intended here by any means, but like, that's just the fact of the matter. Like, if you're average white female liberal, um, nothing that Nick says they're gonna have ears to hear at all. Um, and then maybe they might would hear something Candace says, or they might would hear something Tucker says, but people get siloed. We're still very much, want to silo ourselves, and we just are so susceptible to being siloed by like the various programmings, that people get siloed into these thought bubbles. And then if anything is like getting close to their thought bubble, then it's a breakdown in the reality. And so it's like, and this honestly would probably be a good segue to, I think, your last topic you want to get into, but it's like mass formation psychosis. We've got a lot of like little mass formation psychosis and a lot of like mass trauma-based mind control going on, right? I mean, whether it, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, for example, any crazy conspiracy aside, of like contextually or whatever, just on its face, what everybody could see without looking into weird corners and really questioning the very like nature of it. um a man was shot in broad daylight in public in the head, in the neck and killed. That's a traumatic event. That is a very traumatic event. Um, and it's a very traumatic public event. And so I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing this jostling of narrative and of control to be able to direct the traumatic response that Americans have to such a crazy traumatic event, and directing that energy to whatever particular groups that are vying for that, their little pet direction, whatever that may be. And so, that it was long-winded, but all of that to say is just, yeah, I think discernment's key for sure.
No, well, I would
Take it
agree
all with a
with you
grain of salt,
there.
people.
And that's kind of, I guess, that I was trying to articulate earlier is you can listen to any of these figures, be it some of these people um, that you're referring to, or even some people on the left, and or any of these events that you're talking about. And sometimes it does, you can listen to what they're saying in a vacuum, and it feels like, this doesn't make sense. But it does sometimes feel like there is something larger going on, and like public consciousness is being specifically steered into one direction or another. So I think I do agree with you there. And some people might say that's conspiratorial, but it's also like a lot of this stuff is declassified and known known techniques for intelligence agencies, or you can literally buy the book Propaganda by Edward Bernays. And with any of this stuff, or like with Jeffrey Epstein, like the way that there's been a slow drip around that, because that's something I've had my finger on the pulse of for like over a decade now, or any of these things, or I even see here, like, because that's why I brought it up with Tucker Carlson talking about aliens and stuff. And there's like, in a way, that's like one of the kind of crazier things of our moment, that there's been multiple official U.S. government officials who have said, yeah, there's UAPs. We don't know what's going on with it. We're at a weird time with public consciousness and discourse, where all the schizos are like, no, I don't believe you, this is fake, and the public just doesn't care.
Yep.
And again, that's but the problem is, like you said, it's easy to get into your silo and interpret it through those lenses, instead of trying to see big picture and look more objectively of what the goal could be for all these different events, assuming there is any sort of thought behind it, because the very cynical side of me says, to borrow your term for your blog, it's a dog and pony show. It's just keep spectacle in the news so people don't notice some of these more material problems that we we're talking about, like housing costs and food going up in price, all these other things. But at the same time, I do wonder, if there is a more specific goal, like, MK Ultra type thing or what have you. That's something I go back and forth on a lot personally.
Yeah, no, me too. And as far as trying to wrap my head around it, but I will also say, I mean, I'm kind of a nut in that I definitely, like, I'm very white pilled, and I'm Christ pilled, like I don't have any as a Christian, like I fully believe that Christ has already won the victory. And so, like, all of this evil and like crazy psychotic stuff that's like inexplicable, confusion and chaos, none of it really, like, it interests me in the sense of like wanting to discern like what's happening, and figure out like you know, how to talk about this with people in a way that's measured, but still like realistic with what's happening. And then also, I'm kind of like I'm just impervious to the black pill in that. Stuff's gonna get a lot worse, dude. Stuff will get a lot worse before Christ returns. And whether that's in our lifetime, whether it's in our great, 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 great grandchildren's lifetime, whenever it is, um, I rest assured that, whatever happens, Christ has already won. And so the, all of the alien stuff in particular, I will say is very fascinating insofar as, I mean, just my personal belief is, and I think Tucker has basically said this. I don't know if it's been a while since I've like watched some of the clips where he talks about it, but I mean, I pretty much like I think all aliens are just demons anyway. And so to me as a Christian, like all of that makes total sense when thinking about the world being ruled by principalities of darkness. I mean, it would make total sense that like there are demonic extra dimensional entities that are kind of guiding humanity towards vice and evil and sin, for their own enlargement and increase and satanic pleasure. So, it's and all of that. I mean, what's happening right now with Epstein, his weird little freaky temple on the island, like, all of that. Okay. Um, well, that doesn't sound all that much different from like when they were sacrificing babies at the top of the step pyramids down the road from me, and like all through history. Like it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing new under the sun. As as the
As they,
Bible
yeah,
tells us. I guess does Paul write that in Ephesians, or is that
yeah, I
in
believe so.
forget the exact verse quote on that, but there's certainly nothing new under the sun. So
Yeah, it does seem like there is a return to looking at the world in that way of thinking, and it feels like the scientific mind or rational liberalism um, tried to do away with it. And again, it's something that like I'm still kind of mulling over because I'm still getting out of that mode of thinking, and that's how I was for a long time, despite being raised in a very religious environment. But I've had at least two experiences in my life that I can't explain, and it kind of makes me think of there's different ways to look at it too, because that's something that I found interesting, like the demons as aliens or aliens as demons. Like that, I don't know if you're aware of like a writer like Jacques Vallée who talks about um, the concept these are like extra dimensional beings, however and whichever way you want to put it, and like different cultures will have different like cultural context to understand these experiences. And if you're in uh Saudi Arabia in 1200 AD, you might interpret it as a jinn. If you're a modern person, you might see it as an alien. If you're a Christian, you might see it as a demon. And it's a concept that I find interesting, um, because it does feel like people talk about this through psychedelic experiences or through prayer or different spiritual traditions, that there is an external consciousness that is outside of your own. And interestingly enough, through um, even like declassified CIA documents, they said, yeah, like astral projection works, for example. And they're like, well,
mhm.
we can't do it consistently, or I forget the specificities of it, but it feels like there is something there. And I believe we talked about this last time too. Like, Jung called it the collective unconsciousness. Um, and I feel like that's probably something that is going to be explored more in the coming years within our lifetime, since um, it feels like, it's easy to dismiss people of the past as just, stupid or superstitious. But I think people were, more or less just as intelligent back then as we are now. They just, use different terms to describe these things.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think like recency bias and just the whole modern disposition to just write it all off as a pseudoscience or a superstition, rather, really would be the term. That was very popular there in the early 20th century, especially when they were really like ramping up kind of the end point of um, rationalism and kind of science,
Yeah.
empirical science, and all that. And the thing is, that's very interesting. I want to touch on. I do want to touch on that thought with like the intersection of like science and like these extra dimensional kind of realities. But I did want to ask you, you mentioned like you had like two inexplicable experiences. Have you talked about those, or would you
Yeah,
be
I'll tell you what, I'll talk about one of them for sure.
okay?
That's one of them's a little bit more personal, but the one that I'll talk about was actually a very positive experience because it was when my grandma passed away years ago. And I was a teenager at the time. I think like a lot of us are at that age. You get very moody. And I was a shitty teenager, right? I think like a lot of people are. And when my grandma died, I think I wasn't really taking it seriously. I wasn't really processing it emotionally. And I remember I was staying in my grandma's old house, and I was trying to sleep and I just couldn't. I just felt really restless, and I think probably I wasn't dealing with, the loss of my grandma dying. And then I remember feeling this presence in the room and then feeling, very, very afraid. Um, like something was approaching. I couldn't see it. But then
Hmm.
I felt like this warmth on my back. And because my grandma was a massage therapist, and it felt like just, warmth, like an immaterial massage, like I was getting a massage without actually being touched on my back. And I just remember like I was finally able to like cry because my grandma was dead and I was sad and able to
Hmm.
process it. And that's one of the yeah, that's the one I'll talk about at least that I feel like even at the height of my edgy atheist days, it's like, okay, I can't quite explain that. The very like, what do you want to say? Like the bug man actually is like, well, I was asleep and it was a dream, but I don't know. I think I'm I was cognizant enough to know that I wasn't asleep. So that's my one inexplicable experience for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting, man. That's really cool too. Just that, yeah, and that's a cool experience. So, did you feel like once you kind of felt that physical sensation, was that like, I guess that was like in opposition to like you kind of had like the foreboding sense of like presence, and then that kind of came up and like kind of dispelled that, or like what was that?
Yeah, well, I guess it was more the fear of the unknown because it was feeling that it wasn't a malevolent presence, but I felt like that there was a presence in the room and I
Ah,
didn't know what it was. And then it was like I could just tell that it was my grandma. And she was a very very religious, very Christian woman. So I guess that's how I took it as, grandma coming and saying goodbye before she passes on to heaven, the other side, whatever you want to call it. So
oh,
at least that's my belief.
yeah. Well, that's really cool, man. Yeah, that's really cool. It's I mean, every practically every time angels are mentioned in the Bible as like coming in contact with man, right? Like the first thing they say is, "Be not afraid."
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it would totally make sense to have kind of like that initial fearful reaction in the presence even of angels, because it is inexplicable to our human senses, just our material reality. So yeah, man, that's really cool. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
thanks.
Have
Uh,
you by chance have you read any of C.S. Lewis's space trilogy?
no, it's on my list because I've heard really good things about it, but I read Chronicles of Narnia when I was a kid. I bought a collection of his nonfiction essays, but the physical copies are kind of expensive. I'm keeping my eye out for a decent set of the used stuff.
Nice. Yeah.
What do you ask?
Yeah, well, I just definitely recommend him. I think he does a really good job of kind of yeah, of expressing kind of that interaction of man with the divine in some really, really cool ways that I think resonate well um with scripture.
Hmm.
And I'm only funnily enough, I read the third book, That Hideous Strength, like probably around 2020, and that's the third one, the last one in the trilogy. But I read it first. I think actually Charles Carroll, um, from Million Dollar Extreme. I was like watching some of his streams during that time, and he would like talk about that book a bunch and how it like perfectly captured the moment we were in with like the just the COVID craziness and
Hmm.
everything. And and he was saying, it kind of stands alone because it takes place basically all on Earth, whereas like the other two books are mostly in space. And so I did read just that one standalone, and it was really good. And it definitely does capture exactly what we went through um, at that time, and really are still in a sense, in terms of just how the powers that be operate. But
Hmm.
I've been listening to the audiobook versions of the first two books, and yeah, I'm definitely still like a print supremacist, but I can't really like hold a book while I'm like doing things. So
Sure. Yeah, I listen
audiobooks
to a
are,
lot of audiobooks for that reason.
yeah, are very convenient, but they're very good. Yeah, the first one, super super good. Out of the Silent Planet, some really cool stuff in that one, and I'm probably about a quarter of the way through the second one, Paralandra, and it's also, yeah, been really good so far. So I'd recommend
Yeah,
it.
that's definitely on my list then. Since that makes me think of one more thing at least. Since there's it that's kind of what I was getting at earlier when I was talking about it's just different ways to describe the same phenomenon. Because I don't know how much you follow the tech world and all these people, the way that people who are in that world talk about AI, and it's very interesting because it's become almost religious. Because like the transhumanist thing, at least to me, it's like, well, this is Gnosticism. You're talking about how the human body is filthy and we need to transcend our own um, our own existence, and then we'll exist in this beautiful realm of just pure cognition. It's like, yeah, that's Gnosticism. That's like 2,000 years old. Or when I hear people talk, like even somebody like Ray Kurzweil, and he was asked, and he's like an arch transhumanist, if God exists. He says, well, not yet. And these people are talking about AI, um, like the way that a pagan priest would talk about like some dark Cthulhu like god or something like that. If you've read like Conan the Barbarian, it makes me think of like Thulsa Doom talking about these snake cults, and they talk, oh, AI is going to do this. It's this emerging consciousness. It's going to destroy this, destroy that. We don't know what's happening. Um, and personally, like I'm of the opinion that like this is just it's either marketing or, they're this is things that they want to do anyway, and they're just saying, oh, it's AI, so they can externalize it. But I don't think that religious framing goes away, and it does feel very pagan, if you know what I mean, like the way that they discuss these things. Um, and I think that's part of the reason a lot of people have a visceral reaction to AI images, because there's something about it that's kind of uniquely unsettling in a way that's it's maybe hard to describe.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's very true. It's weird. I've been fiddling around with it. I mean, really since that 2020 kind of time frame there when I guess ChatGPT first launched like to the public, like the first initial public free versions and stuff, fooling around with the image generation, and then when the LLM dropped, checking that out, and um, I've fooled around a lot with some of the music stuff with like Suno. I use that some there on Dog and Pony Show, just making fun music that I wouldn't otherwise be able to just like crank out, but I can kind of curate and fine tune some things way faster using that and come up with some neat ideas. But I'll say, notwithstanding all of the because I agree, I think the context of the language and the conversation of kind of this like quasi religious, definitely pagan kind of nature of it all, I think that's really real. But there is something very unsettling to some of this AI generated content sometimes, and I've seen it myself, like say with even like Suno, and depending on, it's gotten very sophisticated at this point. I was using Suno from like when it very first dropped almost, and it was pretty rudimentary. Like you could type in your lyrics, put in some genres, some instruments, things like that, and it would spit out something, and it was okay just to begin with. But like they've got it to where you can pick and choose stems, like you can edit specific segments of songs and different things like that. But one thing I've noticed there occasionally is like, and it'll be in genres that you wouldn't necessarily even think that this kind of weirdness would be in. Obviously, if you start trying to do some genres that have a little bit more of like kind of darker, like unsettling kind of things, then it's much more apparent. But like even just sometimes with like, I don't know, just genres you wouldn't necessarily think that like random, like weird noises that are like screeches or like just odd
Mm,
things would be coming through. Um, and it's like odd.
yeah.
It's really odd.
Have
And then,
you? I don't know if this is true, but have you ever heard? I haven't seen it myself. People have said that like in the early days of like these image generation things, people would ask some of these LLMs or AI programs to generate an image of itself, and it creates like this terrifying image. And I've tried to search for what that was supposed to be. I've never found it. I don't know if that's urban legend at this point, but I've heard lots of different anecdotes like this of this weird
yeah,
background noise or feedback or whatever that it does make you wonder.
yeah, and I've seen a lot of that too. I remember one time that was going around with like specifically the image of like, oh, create an image of me using Chat GPT or something,
Mhm.
and like the stuff people were like reposting and that was kind of going viral was like this kind of crazy demonic thing, like hovering over, or like just kind of unsettling imagery like that. And I remember actually trying that myself. And I probably could go like scrounge it up, some of the stuff it generated, but it was like, I think just because of like what I had already, because it caters to what you are talking
Yeah.
to it about, obviously. So it's like building a profile. And so like I didn't really get anything.
Speaking of MK Ultra, but
Yeah,
keep going.
exactly. Yeah, I didn't get anything like too super crazy from that. More crazy, honestly, the like weirdest, most unsettling things I've come across are probably the Suno thing, and then also like some of like the album artwork on Suno, because it will just like randomly generate stuff. Um, and like I use Suno for my podcast intro, and I do like a different genre every episode, and I I mean, I usually go through dozens. I mean, from the beginning, I would usually go through like dozens of different variations and like tweaks and stuff to where like it actually sounds like something that is just not, is decent. It's not garbage, and that I find interesting. Um, and so just in all of the random artwork generations it would do, like some of those would get like really freaky. And if I
How
like
so?
like the lyrics to my podcast intro, of course, it's like Spectacle of Descent, it's kind of got a little bit of like tongue in cheek, kind of like
Yeah.
darkness theme to it. But like sometimes the album artwork generated would be like, I don't know, like it's kind of hard to describe, but just think of like AI slop, but definitely with like a demonic bent. And it would also
Yeah.
be different according to like the genre of music that you were doing as well. So that's kind of been the weirdest stuff I've come across. That, and then also I remember one time, because I've tried some different ones, and I think it may have been like Stable Diffusion. And I think I don't know, it was either Stable Diffusion or like Mid Journey or something, and it had this thing where you had to click through like however many hundred images and like give it a thumbs up or thumbs down if you wanted it, if you liked it, basically, to like kind of curate towards what you find aesthetically pleasing. And it would pop up some, like, I actually saved some of them. I'll send you a couple of them, because it would like pop up some random stuff that was like, yo, what are they feeding this thing that it's like popping this up? Just like straight up demonic looking, like weird stuff. Um, so I'd hit the thumbs down real quick,
Interesting.
because I'm not trying to
Hmm.
summon the egregore of the AI demons or anything. Whether there's any actual spiritual element to that or not, but I tend to think that it's possible. I'm not like
Hmm.
foreclosed to it. But that is a big topic.
Now it's yeah, the one thing I mostly use like ChatGPT for work. And I feel like I'd be the one time I like one or two times have been like image generation stuff just for like whatever different stuff like that. I had it like generate what like Prester John Andrews would look like. It's like an old or just like Puritan preacher type of thing, which
Oh
I
yeah,
guess kind of tracks for the name, but some of that stuff like it's very again, not to be too conspiratorial, but it's not a conspiracy that like the AI technology of LLMs and like machine learning and whatnot was developed by DARPA, which also tried to do lifelink. Like there's a part of me that's like, man, I use it like as better Google a lot of the times for like just looking stuff up. It's like, man, I'm kind of just creating the perfect profile on myself right now. So it can be
yeah,
a little bit unsettling. So I do want to. I'm kind of very specific about what I use it for, just because I feel like I'm maybe being too paranoid or maybe not paranoid enough. It's really hard to tell.
yeah. And then evidently it's all discoverable in a court of law in
Hmm.
America. So it's like
Hmm.
you've got there've already been cases where people have they're on trial, alleged to have committed
Hmm.
whatever kind of crime, and they're they've got their Chat GPT log pulled up of them trying to talk to Chat GPT about
I just
covering
killed
it up.
somebody. What's the
Yeah,
what's the
what?
legality here? How do I dispose of a body?
Yep, yep.
Sure, I'd love to help you with that.
Yeah,
Um,
I just DM'd you on Substack actually one of those pictures I saved,
okay, let me.
and it's like, I mean,
Uh,
in and
yeah,
of
it's
itself, it's not like, but that's just something it popped up at random.
it's one of those things. The longer you look at it, the weirder it gets.
Yeah, dude. It's like what even is that supposed to be? And it was a bunch, like there were just a bunch of those like that. And I was like not clicking that, like I was never clicking that as the selection.
Hmm.
But it would just keep popping those up.
Well,
It's bizarre.
hopefully the demon box doesn't end up killing us all. But I think that was always my thing. It's like I understand some people being AI doomers. Like we have so many ways we could destroy ourselves already. It's like add it to the pile. I'm not super worried about AI becoming sentient and killing us all, but that is a little creepy, I'll say for sure. But here's the thing, man. I really appreciate you coming on. I know we've kind of gone over time. I just want to say, thanks for coming on. Do you have any closing thoughts before we get to plugs, promotions, and all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, closing thoughts. Yeah, I would just say Christ is King, John 3:16, and that, when you look at all of the crazy stuff that's happening in the world, um, and the chaos and confusion and death and despair, uh, trust your gut and recognize that that is evil, and seek out the good.
Very nice. Yeah, as far as plugs or promotions, anything you get coming up you want to tell everybody about?
Yeah, so I mean, big thing I would just say is if you interested in any of the stuff I was saying, definitely check out the Aping American. I think you'll really like it. It's a fun book. It's a heavy book. I mean, there's a lot of heavy stuff that I'm wrestling with in it too, but I try and do it with like a levity and like an overall optimism that I hope shines through. And as far as like the rest of this year, check out Dog and Pony Show. Um, Still kind of up in the air, but I'm getting a slate of podcast guests together that I think will be some make for some really great discussions, on the Spectacle of Dissent podcast on Dog and Pony Show, of which one of them probably will already have released by this point with Prester John himself. So I hope you'll tune into that and check that out too. But yeah, only other thing is that I have in the pipeline right now is I am working on an essay. Probably won't even be released by the time this episode drops, or maybe a shorter piece of it will be, but there will be more pieces if so. But I will. It will really be kind of a continuation, and exploration of some of this last topic we've been on in terms of MK Ultra and demons and kind of the intersection of science and spirituality. So if that interests you at all, definitely check me out over at Dog and Pony Show.
Yeah, well, it was a really interesting conversation. I'm gonna have to do this again because I could talk about this type of stuff for like another 2 or 3 hours. But
Yeah, man.
um, but yeah,
Anytime.
one last question. The last thing I always ask my guests is like the sign off question. Um, what is um what is something that makes you feel hopeful for the future, or if you don't have anything specifically, what's something that would?
Hmm. That's a great question. I would say personally for me, um, mm, my family makes me feel very hopeful for the future. Specifically, the work the Lord is doing in my family makes me feel very hopeful for the future. Um, in terms of just drawing my wife and I closer to him, and in doing so, drawing us closer together. And, it just became, I'm a relatively young father. And I think that has been quite a trip, an amazing thing. And there are aspects of that have been really difficult, just with different life circumstances and things going on. But I would say the thing that makes me most hopeful at all is that the Lord is seeing me through those trials and difficulties day by day, and that gives me all the hope I could need.
Well, I think that's a beautiful sentiment. And with that, thanks so much for coming on. It was a very good conversation.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man.
All right, have a good one.